This is episode number 21 with Richard Riehle. Coming up.
There'll be some point where somebody will say, okay, we found you out. You had a nice run. Now go do what you're supposed to be doing. Don't bother us anymore. The theater was booing me. and that was an exciting moment. People are booing my character on the street. So I said, this is great. By the end of August, I'm going to be fighting off offers. Not only did I not work the rest of the year, I didn't have an audition for the rest of the year. Why, then the world and all that's in it's nothing. The Covering Sky is nothing. Bohemia, nothing. My wife is nothing. But, when are you going to retire? I said, from what? I'm enjoying everything I'm doing. Why would I want to stop doing this?
If you're looking for what it takes to be an actor long-term over the course of your life, then you've come to the right place and you're going to really enjoy today's episode. Maybe you feel like there's nothing else you could do, or that you're trained to do, or maybe you're not even sure if this is something you could do for a living. Today's guest felt the exact same way. Hi there, my name is Nathan Agan, and this is The Working Actor's Journey, bringing you in-depth conversations with actors that have been working professionally for decades. Hope you're doing well out there. We are back for Season 3, and if you're just joining us, there are over 20 episodes with fantastic actors you'll want to check out. These conversations are meant to inspire and reassure you on your journey, that the road may be long and challenging, and that it is ultimately rewarding. Today on the show is the actor Richard Riehle, and he had those same ideas and thoughts that I mentioned up top, and yet, after a nearly 50-year career, he's still going. With 400-plus on-screen credits to his name, plus years and years of regional theater, he is truly a working actor. In fact, he's got over a dozen on-screen credits in various stages of production right now. And he's currently rehearsing for the stage adaptation of Key Largo at the Geffen Playhouse in Los Angeles. The show stars Andy Garcia and opens in early November, so get your tickets now. You've probably seen Richard in dozens of things, with very memorable parts in the films Glory, The Fugitive, Office Space, and Casino, as well as appearances on Modern Family, Grounded for Life, and Blackish. And of course, that doesn't even touch on the decades of regional theater Richard did before he even started working on camera. So in today's episode, Richard and I cover how he was open to whatever possibilities came along, literally saying things like, yeah, I guess I can do that. How he saw being an actor as a job. It was what he did to put money on the table. How people can really depend and rely on him. How he does the audition and then walks away. Why it sometimes feels like he's starting all over. And why certain projects that he was excited about didn't end up working out. Richard was willing to do whatever was needed. He truly has that can-do attitude. And he's no stranger to putting in the work. You'll hear a great story from before he was an actor of what he needed to do to stay warm on the job in the freezing Wisconsin winters. Richard even shares how he works on Shakespeare with a speech from The Winter's Tale, so don't miss that. Now, if you're enjoying these episodes, I want to let you know you can also become a premium member of the show, and there are a number of different perks, including bonus episodes, exclusive opportunities, and more. Members can hear additional conversations with past guests Robert Pine, Don Didowick, and Reed Birney. Plus, there will soon be an episode with Richard, including 2 behind-the-scenes stories of working on the films Rooster Cogburn, with John Wayne and Katharine Hepburn, and Casino, with Scorsese, De Niro, and Pesci. You can head to workingactorsjourney.com/premium to find out more. A special shout-out to our members at the co-star level or higher, Adam, Jeff, Robert, Ken, and Ralph. Thrilled that you all are members. And in fact, it was Jeff who connected me with today's guest, Richard. They were at the University of Minnesota at the same time. So I guess that's another bonus of membership. And a special thank you to Jeff for doing that. I also want to mention a new project from one of our past guests. It's called Working.Actor, and it was co-founded by Ben Whitehair, who you'll hear in episode number 11. This is an online, step-by-step guide to becoming a working actor. As they say, it's everything you need to know to be a working actor, all in one spot. Having known Ben for over 10 years, I know he puts a ton of work into whatever he does, so I definitely encourage you to check it out. You don't even need to be in the U.S. to learn from this. So literally, go to working.actor. That's the URL, and right now they're running a launch special. Wherever you are in the world, I hope it helps you out. So here's just a little bit more about Richard's career. He received a BA in Speech and Drama from the University of Notre Dame and an MFA in Theater Arts from the University of Minnesota. For years, he worked what he called the I-5 rep on the West Coast from Alaska to Arizona, hitting many theater companies and Shakespeare festivals in between and along the coast. On Broadway, he's appeared in Execution of Justice, The Iceman Cometh, and The Man Who Had All the Luck, and we talk about all of those shows. In New York, he's also appeared at the Public Theater, Playwrights Horizons, and Classic Stage Company. And regionally, he got his start at the Meadowbrook Theater in Michigan and then worked at the Guthrie, the Goodman, Yale Rep, Milwaukee Rep, and many others around the country. He has been in over 250 feature films and over 60 different television shows, including Of Mice and Men, Free Willy, Bridesmaids, 2.5 Men, The Mindy Project, The West Wing, and The Middle. Having seen Richard in so many different things, it was really such a joy to speak with him, and I always love learning how much more is behind every actor. With Richard, I had no idea the extent of his theater background, and he can run with the best of them. So I'm very honored he's here, and I hope you enjoy this one. So here we go with episode number 21. Please enjoy my chat with Richard Riehle.
Tomorrow I'm doing this strange sort of thing where it's like an audio blog, but we're going to be walking around with iPads, I guess, because they want to pick up the noise of the action that's taking place.
Okay. So you were prepping for that, or rehearsing it, I guess, or
yeah, I was there's 9. There were 9 different episodes of the story, and so I was reading the whole story and then looking specifically at the ones that I was involved in.
So there is no time off for you, Richard, with how much you work.
I try not to leave any, and in fact that's sort of how that was the final blow in the relationship that I had when I came out here in Los Angeles. My girlfriend wanted to go on a vacation. I said, I can't leave. I've got this, and this coming up. And she said, well, I'm going to Switzerland. Goodbye. That was it.
Well, yeah, it's life gives you those choices, and you just have to figure out what you want to do in those moments.
Exactly.
But all right, well, hopefully no regrets. That's I guess that's what they always say, is that you made the right choice, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, cool.
And we're still friends.
Good.
I just talked to her 2 days ago. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, great. Well, speaking of different parts of the world, I actually noticed that we have another very small connection. Because when I was researching it, it looked like you grew up in Wisconsin, or were you born and raised there? And
I was indeed in Menominee Falls. Yeah.
Okay, and that's in. I hope I know there's a lot of Native American names and influence names up there. So I hope I'm pronouncing. Is it Waukesha County?
Waukesha County, yes.
Waukesha. So
yeah, there are three different Menominees. There are the Menominee Indians were lived in that area, and so there's Menominee Falls, which is Waukesha County. It's on the east side of Wisconsin, near the lake.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's Menominee, which is on the north of the state, right near the UP in Michigan, and then there's Menominee, Wisconsin, which is on the Mississippi.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Well,
so it's very easy to confuse.
Yes, yeah. Well, I have friends who live up in Waukesha, Wisconsin, so I've been up there. When I was living in Chicago, I'd go up and visit them. And there's an elegant farmer apple orchard, which I think has been there for, decades.
Oh, I think forever, yes.
Yeah. So, been there with friends and all that. So, yeah, I really enjoy southern Wisconsin. And it's another one of those big states that there's just so much to explore. Did you?
Oh, it's beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you get a chance? Like growing up, did you take a lot of trips around the state? You remember vacations like that, or?
No, not so much. I was the oldest of 7 kids.
Oh,
and,
wow.
yeah, and my father died when I was 13.
Yeah.
And so, and my mother went right back to work. She had been a nurse in the Second World War, and then went right back to nursing. And so we were either working. I had a paper, I think, from the time I was 8, and then when I turned 14 and was legally allowed to get a work permit, I started stocking shelves at the local grocery store 40 hours a week. And so we really didn't get out and about much.
Yeah. Geez, I can imagine. I mean, with your dad dying, at the age you were, I mean, I imagine the youngest was only maybe a year or 2 old at that point.
I think the youngest was 3 at that time.
Yeah. Wow.
There were 7 kids within 10 years.
Wow. Wow. You don't hear that as much these days, but
no, good Irish stock.
Right.
Yeah, she had 11 brothers and sisters. My mother had 11 brothers and sisters. So yeah.
Well, I mean, I can only imagine, your dad passing away as young as he was, that really changed the dynamic and maybe even trajectory of the family a little bit. I mean, and being the oldest, I imagine you were most aware of that.
Probably I remember there was a point right when my youngest brother was graduating from high school, and I'd come back for his graduation, and we went out afterwards, and he said, "What can you tell me about Dad? I don't remember him." He was 3 when he passed. And so yeah, there was, there were 3 groups of kids. I have my next sister is Irish twin. She was born, less than a year after I was, and then 2 more, pretty close on, and then the last 3 were a little more. There was a little more time between each of them, and so they were the youngins, and we were the older ones, even though there was probably only a couple of years difference.
Wow. And so your dad, I read, was an assistant postmaster, and
well, he was constantly working. I remember.
Oh, okay.
He always had 2 or 3 jobs. I remember he started out as a mail carrier, and so he would leave the house around 5:30 and get back about 4, and then he'd change and go to work at Stouffer Steel as a stoker, and then he had another job that he did on weekends. So, he was constantly working, and my mother was a nurse until I was born, and then she took time off with all these kids, and went right back into it.
Now, it's interesting. I grew up with a single mom myself, and I was just talking to my brother. It's like, as you get older, you have these thoughts, and you're just like, I just don't know how she did it. And of course, there was some support and all that, but I imagine it's even more in your case. Like, how did she do it, working as a nurse and with 7 kids?
Yeah, well, her youngest brother, who had just got out of the Navy at the time, moved in with us for about a year, and actually worked as a mail carrier at the post office. So he was sort of there, and then we were the school. We went to St. Mary's Catholic school, and it was within walking distance. So we would literally walk over to school and walk back home, and do our homework or whatever it was. And then when we started high school, we went to Catholic high schools, and they were actually in Milwaukee. So I got an early driver's license, and I was driving myself first down to Marquette, and then two of my sisters who were going to Divine Savior, and so that was sort of a daily trip back and forth. But everybody pitched in.
Right.
It was, and it was a different time. I mean, there were I was trying to remember on our block. I think there were like 5 widows.
Oh, gee.
Wow. And a ton of kids. I mean, there were a zillion kids on that block. And so everybody looked out for everybody else.
Right,
I mean, there was never any question.
Yeah. No, that's great that there was that kind of almost, present support network, to some degree that, just existed like that.
Right. It was a little like our town.
Yes.
Yeah.
Everybody pitched in. Exactly.
Everybody knew everybody's
right.
business.
Yes. Yeah. Probably too much so.
Maybe.
So, all of your siblings, are any of them, did they go artistic routes as well or different?
No, none of them.
Really?
No,
okay.
No, my youngest brother had just retired, in December, and he was a VP at a bank. He had a very interesting story. His story is more interesting than mine, but, he was a CPA. He worked at one of the breweries in Milwaukee, and then was looking for a job, and he got headhunted by this guy that I don't know how he met him exactly, who was the head of Bank One, and the guy wanted him to be his driver, but he wanted somebody that understood finances and that he could bounce ideas off of while he was driving. And he along the way, he sent him to this defensive driving school because at that time he was afraid he might get robbed or kidnapped or whatever. And so after a few years, the guy said to him, "Look, this is a waste of your time now. What do you want to do?" And he said, "Well, I would be interested in financing businesses." And he says, "Okay, I've got a friend that has several banks up in northern Wisconsin, and I think he'd love to have someone like you doing this. Let me give him a call." And so he was suddenly he found himself up in West Bend as the VP for business financing there, and did that up until. But that's the thing. My another sister was a CFO for Children's Hospital in Seattle.
Oh yeah.
Another sister is a executive secretary for a patent office in Milwaukee. A brother is I know he was a troubleshooter for a bank in Arizona, and he was brilliant. I mean, he was on the line all the time, answering questions and solving problems that I couldn't even fathom what they were asking him.
Wow.
And but none of them were in the arts.
Interesting.
And when my youngest brother retired, as each of them had along the way as they were getting ready to retire, said, "But when are you going to retire?"
Yep.
I said, "From what? I'm enjoying everything I'm doing. Why would I want to stop doing this?"
You get to play pretend for a living. What's to retire from?
Exactly. So as long as I can keep a roof over my head, right. I'm happy.
No, that is pretty funny that as the oldest, that who knows when you'll retire, and all your younger siblings have decided to take a break.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, that is really fascinating that as the oldest and one of 7, that you're the one who pursued the arts. And so, I wanted to jump in there and figure out, was it in high school? Because I know you went on to Notre Dame, but did you have an idea in high school that you wanted to go into the arts, or what led you to going to Notre Dame? That kind of, where did that come in?
No, it was totally by chance. I went to Marquette University High School. I graduated from there. Then I went in the seminary for 3 years.
Oh wow!
After which time, I realized I didn't have a vocation, and I think they did sort of the same point. And so they said, "Look, we can get you into 2 schools. We can get you into Marquette University here in Milwaukee, or we can get you into Notre Dame." And so I said, I think I'd like to get away from Milwaukee.
Sure, yeah.
And so they got me into Notre Dame. This was oh gosh, this was the early '60s, and everything was the space race and all that. So I thought, well, maybe I'll study engineering for no reason. I mean, I had no talent in that area.
Well,
and it showed.
What was the what were the interests or your aptitudes in high school? Did you excel in any particular things or sports or anything like that?
I was pretty good. I was pretty good in English. I ended up taking AP English test and so I got an AP English when I went to Notre Dame. I also got AP in German. And had a pretty good feel for that language, but that was about it, right? I like to read, and so I read all sorts of stuff, but I didn't really have any talents that I can think of, for anything like that. Certainly not in organic chemistry or calculus or any of the stuff that I needed to take. And so I got there, and I almost flunked out freshman year. Geez. I said I can't do that. But I was taking this 5-credit German course and acing it, and it was being taught by the head of the department. And he said, "Well, are you in the sophomore year abroad program?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Well, I said I could be." And he said, "Well, you have to be a German major." I said, "Sign me up." And so So I spent my sophomore year in Austria. We went to Salzburg and had an 8-week intensive, which was 6 days a week, nothing but German, living it, talking it, taking classes, and that was great. And at night we would go in to see projects that were being done as part of their Mozarteum, which they have this Mozart festival every year there in Salzburg, and then we went to the University of Innsbruck, and I was there for 2 semesters. And at the end, almost everybody was, jumping on the boat back to the U.S. But this guy that I had been rooming with had been in Austria as an AFS student, and so he said, "Listen, I'm going to visit the people that I lived with when I was in Austria. It's this tiny town called Breitenfeld in Ostösterreich, and why don't you come along with me? It'll only, be a week later when we're leaving." And, I said, sure. So we went to Breitenfeld, and there, the son of the farmer it was a farm. Mm-hmm. I mean, and it literally was one street with about 6 or 8 farms on each side and a Gasthof at the end of the T. And if you went up the street, you would go up the hill, and that's where the church was. And so they said, "Look, our son has got to spend his summer at the university doing the farming. We need somebody, to do whatever farm work needs to be done. Mm-hmm. Can either of you stay?" And my buddy couldn't stay, but I said, "Why not?" And so for about 3 months, I lived on this farm in a town of about 400 people. No one spoke English. It was great. I did everything from slopping out the dairy, the cows at the end of the day. I didn't milk them. I have to admit that. But and the chickens, and then collecting the wheat and taking it to the silo and stuff like that. It was terrific. I had a wonderful time, and it only got cut short because Russia decided to invade Czechoslovakia.
Oh, jeez.
And the farmer said, "Look, the last time they did this, they just came right in and took us. So you better take off."
Wow.
So I did, and got back to the States.
It's so funny that already, and it's great to hear that you were just so open to opportunities and things. Whether it was the German study abroad or just going to Notre Dame in the first place. I mean, there's just this fun energy, and I think it's admirable of just someone being so open to, sure, sounds great, and just being in the moment. And I love that you brought up the AFS, American Field Service, I believe, because there was actually,
I think so.
Yeah, there was another guest, Jeffrey Wade, who he went to Italy, I think either right after high school or something like that, and it was the first time I had learned about it. But it's such a cool program, and it's still going on today, and all that. So it's very cool to hear people's different connections and stories. Well, as you were talking about all these different experiences, I was also wondering, because you said, I didn't have any particular skills in high school. So I was wondering, okay, was it, were the seven of you guys, like a cohort, like a unit, and did you like cruise and cause trouble and all that, or were you like the nice boys and then the nice family in town, or what?
It was a good group, and like I say, there were probably about 40 kids on our block, and so we would we pick up games of baseball and football and whatever, and also my cousins. My mother's brothers and sisters still lived in the area, so almost at least once a week we would meet at her parents' house up in Lannon, and there'd be about 30-some cousins.
Good Lord!
It was a time where there were tons of kids,
right?
And everybody was just having a great time.
Right.
Nobody got into any real trouble, but there was mischief to be made.
Yeah, of course. Well, with 7 kids in the house, I don't know how you couldn't get into some mischief every now and then, or
right.
Your mother would have been some kind of saint to have 7 perfect kids all the time.
Well, she was a saint, but
yes.
We weren't 7 perfect kids.
yeah. I guess that's a great way to put it. Okay, cool. So you were in Germany, and then obviously because of the Russians, you leave there, and so that was just your second year in college. And then was it when you came back to Notre Dame?
When I came back, I was looking for a work study job. And the guy that was running the psych department at the time was making a test, and he wanted somebody that would collate the results of these tests. And then compare them to the test that he was doing, which was choosing between works of art. It was interesting. I didn't know a thing about it.
Mm-hmm.
I was doing grunt work, but it was great. But I had to be a psych major in order to get the job, and so I said sure. And unfortunately, it involved a 5-credit statistics course, which I proceeded to flunk.
Yeah.
And so. But I managed to make it through that year, and then the next year I said, well, "What am I going to do? I can't keep just wandering through
right.
this university and paying these this it was private school, paying these whatever huge sums at that time, and so I." As many did, I got I did an English major, but I couldn't get it all in one more year, and so I was going, I've got to get out here. What am I going to do? And one of the guys that I had been in Austria with was a speech and drama major, was speech and drama at Notre Dame.
Yeah.
And he said, you can take all the credits you need to get a speech and drama major in one semester. And so I said, okay, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take all the speech and drama credits in one semester. So that was my first experience doing that. I'd never seen a play until I was in college. We never went to the movies. We couldn't afford it essentially.
Sure.
And so I didn't know what any of this was. And to make matters even more exciting, it was the 50th anniversary or something of the theater department. And so all of the majors were going out on tour with this play called Company of Wayward Saints. And so as the only declared major that was still there, I was expected to do the play that they were putting on at the university, which was a play called We Bombed in New Haven by Joseph Heller. And it was a major anti-war play, and it was done in a style that was totally not unrealistic and addressing the audience and getting them involved. And I had no idea what I was doing. They handed me the script. It was 200 and some pages, on evergreen editions, and I just started, memorizing as fast as I could, and did whatever they told me. There was one night they would bring in members of the faculty to play the hunter and the hunter and the golfer. I think were the two guys that kind of attack Starkey, the main guy, and the hunter had a gun, and he would shoot at Starkey, and but they were making their own they were making their own shot, and so one time they put too much wadding in it, and fortunately I had a corduroy coat I was wearing for the part at that time, and the guy, I was facing the audience, and all of a sudden I hear the gun go off, and I feel this shot at my back, and the wadding had landed in the coat and was still smoldering a little bit. But that was university theater.
Yeah.
When there was no, that was it. There were 9 majors, and the 9 majors were all out on tour, and then there was me and whoever they could coerce into doing this stuff. But it was a great experience because I learned everything about theater because I was thrust into it. I was working in the shop all the time. I was stage managing when I wasn't on stage. I was doing minimal acting after that show when the majors came back. But I had to direct something. I had to design something. It was really fascinating.
And so, did you feel like you just took to this like a duck to water, like this was the missing ingredient, or was it like anything else where you just were engaged in the moment in it?
It was interesting. I loved every bit of it. I didn't think it was something I could do for a living, but it was I really enjoyed it. But they were happy enough. Evidently I showed them enough. I think it was just hard work.
Right.
That they were finding a scholarship for me at Purdue University. Purdue had recently opened a professional theater on the campus, and they were looking for people to do stage management and construction and that sort of stuff, and at the professional theater. So what you would do is you would go to Purdue for 1 year, you would get an MA, and you would be journeyman into the IATSE program that was based in Chicago. So that was really going to provide work. I mean, definitely there would be work available once that happened. And so they said, okay, we're working this out for you. When you finish up in January, you'll go right down to Lafayette. You'll be there for a year, and at the end of that time, you can go to Chicago or anywhere in the region here, and apply for jobs, and you make a living doing this. And I said, good.
Wow.
That's what college should do for you. Yeah. And so I went and took my first final exam, and I got a message, go and see the dean. So I went to the head of the theater department. So I went to see him, and he said, the government cut the funds. We don't have anything for you. They said they'll accept you in September, but they can't offer you any money. And so that's where it is. So I took my last finals and went back to Wisconsin. Now, this is January. Went back to my summer job, which had been unloading and processing railroad ties. And in January, when the ties came in, they were green, and so they were frozen together. So the first thing you did was you had to hack out one of the ties and put it in a barrel and pour some gasoline on it and start it on fire, because that was the only heat you were going to have all day.
Oh, geez,
and
wow.
Then you would process the ties. So I was doing that, and I thought, I wonder if I can find a job indoors. And I saw in the paper there was this ad they were looking for someone at the Milwaukee Rep to do stage management and construction. I said, well, this is perfect. So I went. I called them up and I said, can I come in and apply for it? They said, sure. So I walk in the door and they went, oh, geez, we're sorry. This is only for minorities. But we've got this big show that's coming in, and we really could use another ASM. Would you be willing to come on and work as ASM? I said, sure, of course. So I started working as ASM there, and meanwhile, the guys back at Notre Dame felt so bad that they got me a teaching assistantship up at the University of Minnesota, and in the scene shop.
Okay.
And so at the end of this show, Mary Tiger, who was the production stage manager at that time, said, "Look, would you want to come back next year for the whole season as ASM?" I said, "Well, I've got this offer to go up and work in the scene shop at Minnesota." She said, "Fine, go up there, get your degree, and then give me a call and come back here." And I said, "Okay." So I went up to University of Minnesota and worked in the scene shop. And I said, "Well, I'm spending 40 hours a week in the scene shop. Maybe I'll audition for a play just to see what that's like." And this graduate student, had written this play called "Bang Bang You're Dead" about Great Lakes Naval Base,
mm-hmm.
which is where the Korean War vets were brought back, and it was a hospital there too. And his play was sort of like One Floor of the Cuckoo's Nest, only McMurphy kills the nurse, and so. Geez. Yeah, instead of getting the electroshock treatment.
Right.
And so I did the play, and it was a huge hit there. All the professors came and saw it because it was his graduate thesis, and suddenly people were saying, "Well, can you do this play? Can you do this play?" And so I would be acting in all these plays while I was taking classes, while I was working at the scene shop, and it was an exciting time, and they submitted me for a McKnight Fellowship, which I didn't get, but again, my advisor used to spend 6 months each year when he wasn't teaching at the university, directing at the Meadowbrook Theater in Michigan. And he said, "Look, you can work at the Guthrie anytime. Why don't you call Terry Kilburn up at the Meadowbrook Theater and see if they've got any positions there." And so I got a job there as assistant stage manager in small roles, and then got slightly larger roles over the years. I worked there on and off for about 6 seasons.
And I'm just so curious. Of course, there are certain stereotypes, for the oldest, of a family, and maybe the expectations of the oldest and all that kind of stuff. But the fact that you were just so, and I say directionless in a good way, that you were just so open to things and so willing to try something new or try something different. Where do you think that came from, or where did that start? Was that a quality that you always had, that you were just so open to things? Because of course, a lot of people, may feel like, well, this is the thing I want to do, and I want to, go down all these avenues and pursue this to the nth degree as far as I can. But you just seemed so open, and I mean, it seems to have worked for you in a number of ways. Yeah,
no, it did, and I think, probably I always was willing to try, whatever was available and whatever seemed at all possible. And then once I started doing this, I said, okay, right now I'm working. I'm working as a stage manager and as an actor. I'll do this, as far as it takes me. And then, there'll be some point where somebody will say, "Okay, we found you out. You had a nice run. Now go, go do what you're supposed to be doing. Don't bother us anymore."
Right.
And so I give myself a year, and then I say, "Well, I'm still working. I'll do it for 2 years and see what happens, and then I'll do it for 5 years and see what happens." And then at that point, I realized I couldn't do anything else.
Yeah.
This is all I was doing. But yeah, and it was there were. Again, people were helpful always along the way. When I was after my first season at the Meadowbrook, one of the stage managers was going out to do the Oregon Shakespeare Festival during the hiatus, during the break, mm-hmm. And he called and he said, look, they're going to need a ton of men this season. Send me your resume, and I bet you they'll make you an offer. And so I sent him my resume, and sure enough, they said, can you be out here in a week? And I said, yeah, well, I got a car. I'll get out there as soon as I can. And so then I went through the audition process, and at that time, it was a non-equity theater company that just worked during the summer, and so they would do these round robin auditions for about 2 or 3 days, and then put your casting up, and that's what you did, and everything was in rep. And I thought, how am I going to do this? I've got to learn 3 shows,
right?
And they're all Shakespeare, and I've done like maybe 1 or 2 Shakespeare plays up to this point, and so, but I found out that the brain is another muscle like any other one, and so the more you exercise it, the better it gets at it. So by the time I needed to have that material, it was there. And again, Ashland is a wonderful place to work.
Yep.
Yeah, and so I would for a couple of years I went back and forth between Ashland and the Meadowbrook until the Meadowbrook offered me an equity card, and then at that point I couldn't go to Ashland until they won equity, which was I think in 1980. Yeah.
Okay.
And so. Yeah.
And so it sounds like, even though you did, have this speech and it was speech and drama, is that what it's called? Or speech?
Yeah. Speech and drama degree.
So you had a speech and drama degree, but it sounds like a lot of your acting training came from working, just being on stage or observing at stage.
Being on
manager?
stage or being near the stage.
Right.
Being backstage and
right.
watching people. It was always fascinating. I mean, I still constantly do that. I mean, for instance, I can't remember who it was, but somebody said, "Look, if you're doing something, never be more than 100 feet from the camera. Watch what's going on. Be aware."
Sure,
and I found that to be a really good piece of advice.
Yeah. Yeah, to be as close to the action as you can, just to observe and absorb all you can. Yeah, absolutely. Well, and it's so cool that you had those opportunities. And I imagine in the non-equity days of Oregon, there was a lot of spear carrier kind of stuff, but you're still there. And you're still watching the main actors and all that kind of stuff and the leads and picking up, okay, what works, what doesn't. And then of course you can bring that back to Meadowbrook and vice versa. What you're learning. Yeah. But so did you have ideas? I mean, I know you said you got your equity card at the Meadowbrook, but did you have the plan of like, okay, I want to become an equity actor and work in the, Minnesota regional theater scene or Pacific Northwest? Did you know what you wanted to do at that point?
Well, at some point I had to be equity in order to keep working at the Meadowbrook.
Got it. Yeah.
That was a given. You could only do a certain amount of time there as a non-equity actor. And then I was doing Macbeth at the Boar's Head Playhouse up in Lansing, Michigan, and I had a break from there, and I said, well, I'm going to go out to Seattle. While I was at Ashland, a number of people from Seattle said, "Oh, you got to come up and audition up here." And it was Labor Day weekend, and so I said, "Here, I'm going to fly out to Seattle. I've got some friends out there now, and I'll do the audition. I'll arrange for auditions at all the theaters there, and just see if there's any hits, if anybody gets excited about it." So I drove my car, which had no floorboards. I only mention this because I ended up parking it at long-term parking at the Milwaukee County Airport, and then had to call my mother to get it out of there before it cost more than it was worth, and she was so upset about the fact there were no floorboards. But
of course.
Story. Yeah, but so I flew out to Seattle. And I had an audition for Duncan Ross at I think 1:00.
Wow!
And then for ACT up there at 3, and then I was going to have dinner with Megs Booker, who was running the Intimon at that time, because I knew her from Ashland. She had done an Ashland directing, and then I was going to meet with Burke Walker and the Empty Space people that night at 7, and then the next afternoon I was going to the matinee of the show at ACT. So so I do all that. I do my auditions. Everybody's very nice. And the next day I go to the show at ACT, and during the intermission, they're paging me at ACT. And so I go to the box office and I say, somebody is calling my name, and they said, "Oh yeah, we have a phone call for you. Can you call Megs Booker right away?" And so I said, "Okay." And so I called Megs, and she said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm here at the play." And she said, "Well, we just lost an actor. He went into the hospital. He has, he's not going to be able to do the show. We're rearranging the roles, but we need somebody to pick up this one small role at the end. Is there any way that you can?" We go into tech today. It's nice. And so I said, "Is there any way that you could possibly do that?" And I said, "Oh, yeah, I guess so."
Right.
And so I show up at the theater, and we do it, and I know about a third of the cast.
Oh, okay.
And so that it was all easy. It was Anatole. The play was Anatole, and the main thing that we had to do was Mark Murphy and I had to do these very elaborate scene changes between each scene, and we managed to get laughs almost every time, which was great. And so I'm doing that. So opening night, Pat Patton from Ashland, it comes up to see the show, and he's directing the next play, which is a Bus Stop. And he after the show he comes and he says, "Look, this actor is not going to be able to come back in to do Bus Stop. He was supposed to do this role. Is there any way that you could stay and do another show?" And I said, "Yeah, I guess so. What's the role?" They said, "Virgil." And I said, "Yeah," but I said, "I don't play the guitar. I all that." He said, "That's okay. We'll work it out." And so I stayed and did Bus Stop. Well, by the time it went into rehearsal for Bus Stop, by the end of that week, the first week of rehearsal of Bus Stop, Bill Ross had offered me a season at the Seattle Rep, and Burke Walker had offered me a couple of shows at the Empty Space, which I couldn't do because at that point the Empty Space wasn't that good either. And I explained it to him. He said, "Fine, I understand." So I was essentially there for a year's worth of work, and by the time I finished up the season at the Seattle Rep, ACT, which was a summer season, had offered me a couple shows, and Megs had come back and offered me a couple shows. So I had worked for 10 months out of this trip to
for a Labor Day weekend trip.
Labor Day weekend.
Yeah. So now I know this is probably a tough question, but why? I'm just so curious. Obviously, you work and you meet people, and lots of us have connections that way. But what do you feel like you brought to the table, or was it about your work ethic that so many people were just like, we got to call Richard. He's, we can see, let's see if he can help us out. What was there something conscious on your part, or what do you feel like was the reason for all of these things just kind of lining up so well?
Well, I strangely enough, I think it was because I always just thought of it as a job. A lot of people I went to school with formed little companies and did all this exciting theater work, but then had other jobs because they were essentially doing it for free. And I said, "Look, I can't afford to do free theater as much as I'd love to.
Right.
I'll come and see your plays. I'll buy a ticket. I'll support you that way. But I've got to be able to make a living doing this. That's the only thing I have. And so I, because I approached it as a job, I made sure that I had all those elements, that I was prepared, that I had the right energy, that I had, that the people I was working with were, I supported them every way I could, and I think that was just it, that they could depend on me,
right?
They could rely on me, and they knew that I'd be there and clock in, on time and not leave until everything was completed.
Right. Well, yeah, and it certainly sounds like anyone that has to heat themselves by burning a railroad tie on fire, is probably somewhat of a good work ethic.
Yeah, I guess.
So, it raises a question. So it sounds like, well, I love the fact that you were just so honest with yourself, or at least at the time feeling like this is my skill set right now. This is what I'm qualified or trained to do to some degree, even though someone may find me out at some point. But knowing like, okay, this is the most likely way I can make money. And so I'm just going to make money doing this. But it also sounds like there was an idea of like, even though you were working so much, did you wish you could be doing some of the other kinds of theater that, the people you went to school with were doing? Like, were they doing experimental stuff or did you have dreams that way?
Yeah, they were doing experimental stuff. They were doing, they were doing exciting theater. And yes, I would have loved to have been part of that. Mm-hmm. I just didn't feel I could afford to do that.
Right.
And I was having a good time too. Part of it was once I got to the West Coast, I ended up doing the I-5 rep. I was working in Alaska. I was working in, Seattle and Portland and Ashland and San Francisco and Santa Maria and Arizona and meeting all of these people. And then because it was the I-5 rep, you were constantly reacquainting yourself with people that you had met other places along the line.
Right.
So it was always fun to say, oh my gosh, what have you been doing since the last play we did? And
sure.
And it was exciting that way. I remember people. One thing about Ashland is people used to stop in all the time because they were working their way up and down the I-5, and so it was great to have guests come in and spend time in Ashland because it at that time you didn't lock your doors. You did,
Right.
I remember being asleep and having Fat Jack O'Reilly, an old friend of mine from Detroit, show up and he, I was asleep, and he literally came in and put his big mitt on my chest. And said, Dick, it's Jack. Don't worry, it's Jack. And then we sat there and talked. And I said, "What are you doing?" He said, "Oh, well, I got this offer down in Los Angeles, and I didn't want to sit around and wait until they made a decision, so I thought I'd take off. And I knew you were up here, and blah blah blah." And so, an hour later, he says, "Oh, is it okay if I bring my girlfriend in? She's in the car." So it was, he's the mayor of Dearborn now. I mean,
wow.
It's so much fun making acquaintances through the theater, but also through the places that I got to spend time.
Right. And so now this was, I'm guessing, what, late 60s, early 70s, or in the mid 70s? Is that when this was?
Yeah, it was. I was okay. I was in Ashland in 71, 2, 3, 4, and then I was at the Meadowbrook in 71 through 5 or 6.
Wow.
And then in 75, I think it was 70. Well, 75 summer I was at the Colorado Shakespeare Festival, and then 76 was Labor Day that I went out to Seattle.
Wow. Okay.
And then worked the I-5 until the early 80s when I was doing a play at the Empty Space called Through the Leaves, and it was being directed by Emily Mann. And Emily would go down to San Francisco on our day off because she was commissioned to write this play, Execution of Justice, about Harvey Milk, George Moscone murders.
Right, yeah.
And they were going to do it at the Berkeley Rep. And that's who commissioned it. And eventually got done all over the country and was a huge hit and got a lot of heat. but Emily wanted to do it in New York, and she held off allowing it to be done there until she could direct it. And so I get this call a couple of years later from her saying, "Look, we're doing it on Broadway. I can't make an offer to you, but if you want to come out and audition for the producers, I'm sure there's something that we'll find for you." And says, "Yeah." I said, "Sure, of course I'll come out." And the thing was that I'd gotten to the point where I was having a great time doing regional theater. I did it for like 15 or 16 years, essentially living out of my car, just moving from one place to the other, wow, yeah. doing these plays, me having a good time. And but I never wanted to go to New York. I always said, I'm not going to go to New York to be unemployed. Mm-hmm. If I have a job in New York, I'll certainly want to do that. But I don't want to go and wait tables in New York. That's not what I'm doing. And so I went out. I did the audition. They cast me. I moved out to New York, and the play, we rehearsed for 4 weeks and ran it for 2, and they closed. It was a wonderful play. It probably shouldn't have tried to open right on Broadway. It probably should have opened at the public and then moved. Mm-hmm. It had already been done. It was all around the country. Been like 14 productions.
Wow.
Started. I think the first one was actually in Louisville, but it had been done at Berkeley Rep. It had been done at Washington Arena, and the same New York Times reviewer had reviewed Louisville, the Arena, at least one other one. And each time he gave it a good review, but each time it was it's a great play. You should see it, but it wasn't as exciting as the first time he saw it, the first review, and so it wasn't enough to keep it open. Also, the opening week was Holy Week, which made no sense.
Yeah.
And it was the first show in what is now the August Wilson Theater. They had opened it. It was first show in there, and at that time it was called Virginia. They had just renamed it to Virginia, and it was up on 52nd Street. Nobody knew where the theater was.
Right.
People were getting lost trying to find the theater.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah. So I mean, it had things going. It was a wonderful play and terrific actors.
Yeah.
John Spencer. We had a great time doing it, and it was over. But now I was in New York. I had gotten an agent. I'd never had an agent up until then. I'd done everything, by personal contact.
Right.
And I was told in New York the only way I'd even get an audition is to have an agent. So I got an agent from that play, and they started sending me out, and I, surprisingly, to my mind, I was doing pretty well. I did Joe Papp's first play of the Shakespeare cycle, A Midsummer Night's Dream, which they extended. Then that was exciting. I did a couple plays at CSC, and I started doing a little bit of film and TV. Mm-hmm. I did all the soaps, and I did Black Rain, and then I was doing a play up at the Yale Rep called Moon Over Miami by John Guare.
Sure, yeah.
And it's a wonderful play. And when we finished the run, John said, "Look, would you be willing to not take another play for a month while I see if we can bring this show into New York? I really think it's got that going for it. And if not New York, I think the Miami Coconut Grove Playhouse in Miami is interested. They might be interested in doing it." And so everybody said, "Sure, that'd be terrific." So I had done in February, I think I had done Glory. And had gone down to Savannah and shot that, and so my agent said, "Well, look, if you're not going to do anything, and it's December, it's kind of slow anyway, why don't you go to L.A. for the opening of Glory, and we'll see, meet our L.A. office, and we'll see what we can line up for you there in terms of auditions. So I went out to L.A. and I wasn't able to get there for the premiere. So the first day I was out there, I went to a matinee of the show, and I couldn't believe people, the theater was booing me. And that was an exciting moment. People are booing my character on the street, and so they got me a number of auditions, and in fact, I ended up shooting a couple of things, and the final audition they got for me was for the Ferris Bueller
the
TV series.
Yeah, and this is a movie that was so huge and so popular. And so I'm curious, when you get the TV show or just even auditioning, how do you make that character your own? And how do you approach that?
Well, this was Brandon Tartikoff's pet project.
Okay.
He's been wanting to do it since the movie came out. He and John Hughes were gonna make it right away, and then something happened, and then they were good. They tried again, then something happened, and then eventually Hughes left it to go on to do his movies, and this was Tartikoff's last shot as head of NBC. He was going to go. He was leaving once the season was set up. He was leaving to take over Paramount, and so he was going to get this. He was going to get the movie done, by hell or high water.
Right.
And so I got the script, and I'm looking at it, and I said, there's a certain rhythm that the audition scene was the principal welcoming the students at the beginning of the year. Mm-hmm. I said, there's a certain rhythm here that sounds. I wonder if that is. And then it sort of hit me. I said, oh, it's More Science High from
the Firesign Theater, yeah.
Yeah, Firesign Theater, yeah. So I said, oh, so that's what they wanted. So I did it like the principal in More Science High, and the writer literally fell off the chair. The director was looking at him and saying, "What's going? Oh, this is a setup. You brought him in, blah 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 blah." And the writer says, "No, he's the first one that figured out where I stole this from."
Which I think is like it's a good point to kind of highlight that it's okay to steal. I think as actors.
Yes. But, Oh my gosh. I mean, it wasn't. He just stole the rhythm. Mm-hmm. I mean, it wasn't like he was stealing the scene or anything.
Right.
He wrote his own scene.
Right. But even as a performer, you understand. Hearing the performers from Firesign Theater, that it was like, okay, you want to. You didn't feel like, oh, I need to create 100%. It's like, no, I'm going to borrow this because I feel like it is this, and it turned out it was. But being okay to use what you have seen before.
Yes. Absolutely. I agree with that completely.
Okay, cool. And so there really wasn't for you any comparison of what they had done in the film or what the movie was. It was your own character. You were just approaching it fresh. Was that how you would look at it? Pretty
much, yeah. I mean, I had seen the film I think once, mm-hmm. and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And but I wasn't Jeffrey Jones. He's a bigger man than I am. And so I was doing my version of and they made him the principal rather than the vice principal, which I was really happy about that. So, but yeah, and it was Charlie Schlatter was Ferris.
Right.
It was Jennifer Aniston's first regular thing.
Wow, yeah.
She played his sister.
Yep.
Amy Dolan's played the girlfriend. It was a wonderful group of people. And so it was the unfortunate thing is that, and they did a great job of it. We had some wonderful people. Jamie Tarsus was our showrunner, and we had some great people writing each episode and directing it. We had terrific guest actors, but it was also the season that Parker Lewis came out on Fox.
Sure.
And it was Fox's first first full season of doing things, and they got a lot of exposure and a lot of press, and they went that extra, little bit on all their stuff. It was Ferris Bueller, but with Batman whiz bang stuff.
Right. Yeah.
And that went, and NBC decided, well, I think we can find something else.
Sure.
And that was actually the most depressing thing about it, is that, so we finished up shooting just before Thanksgiving, and they said, okay, we'll see you all in January. No point in, in having a wrap party, because we'll be back. And they never heard from them again. Thing was, we followed Fresh Prince of Bel-Air.
Okay.
Originally, it was it was Fresh Prince and Ferris Bueller and blah blah blah. This was the hit off of the night. So they eventually told us, or told my agents, I guess, because that's where I heard it from, that they just decided there wasn't enough. That the two shows were too different, and the audiences were too different. They couldn't pull them. So they found another show that they thought would really fit in with that, and it was Blossom. So for 6 years, Blossom followed Fresh Prince, but it couldn't have been. A show that was less like Fresh Prince, so that would be to grab that audience and hold it.
Right. Yeah. No. That's one of those, like, we're going in a different direction. It's like, I don't know if you know what that means. Right. Yeah. Like that's a very, yeah. Well, so, I mean, on some level, I feel like, here you are doing regional theater all over the place and being successful. And then all of a sudden you're a series regular on a major network following another major show. Like, did you feel like, I've made it, or I'm like, this is it, or here it goes? Or?
Well, yes and no. Yeah. Yes and no. Actually, I went back to New York and did a play that I had been committed to. We had done the play. We had done a birthday party just before I came out to LA, and at CSC, and that was a whole thing of getting it done, because Pinter was so upset with the original New York production, not the production so much, but the response to it, that he never wanted it done in New York again. And so he eventually, through a lot of cajoling, Carrie Perloff managed to get permission to do a limited run of Birthday Party, and we had a wonderful cast. So we did it, and it was very successful. And so Pinter, back in London, sent Lauren Bacall to see the show to report back to him.
Oh, jeez! Wow.
And so she saw the show. She was very nice. Came back and said hello to everybody, and then she said, "This is great." And so Carrie gets this call from Pinter, said, "Can you extend it?" And she said, "No, we're a subscription theater. We have another show coming in," and and he said, "Well, how about if I give you the rights to Mountain Language, and you can do it as the curtain raiser?" And she said, "Okay, but it'll have to be like a year from now." And he said, "Okay, that's fine." So a year from, it worked out that that's when Ferris stopped, and so I went out there, and Pinter was there, and so he met with us. Would not give any information about either play, but was a wonderful raconteur, and just and wonderful person to have in rehearsal and afterwards. He did, interestingly enough, he did do a presentation at the YMHA in which he did a scene, a bit of a scene from Hot House and a bit of a scene from One for the Road. And Hot House was the play he wrote right after Birthday Party, and One for the Road was the play he wrote just before Mountain Language. And I went out there and watched him do it, and he was actually quite a wonderful actor. And I understood more about things that I had questions about the Pinter style and all that from watching him do those two readings.
Wow.
than I had from all the reading I had done about it. And so we had a nice little run with those two shows, and he was there for the opening and closing, and it it was very nice. So I came back to L.A. to do the following pilot season, and I got a pilot with Dan Aykroyd, and I thought, this is great. I will be working forever. Dan Aykroyd doing this pilot. Didn't go.
Yeah.
But interestingly enough, my agents began getting me film auditions. So I ended up doing like 6 films. Fried Green Tomatoes,
right.
And
well, it looks like,
Mice and Men.
Right. And yes. And I mean, I see Prelude to a Kiss and The Public Eye and Hero and Body of Evidence. And I mean, these are all like pretty major studio films. Were you nervous working on these movies? Was it training for you, or was it just what you had always done? I mean, you're pretty right out of the gate. I mean, I know you had been working as an actor for many years up to this point, but you're just now doing, a lot of film. And so I was just curious where you were at with all that. I mean, maybe the Ferris Bueller was what, kind of cemented things of your technique.
Yeah, the Ferris Bueller was like working like a 9-to-5 job.
Yes.
So you got kind of used to it. And the thing was that there were people like Free Willy. On Free Willy, I met Michael Ironside, and he was a great mentor. And talking about film and what we were doing and how to do it, and he was right out there in the middle of doing it. So it was great. And then doing Mice and Men, it was Gary Sinise and John Malkovich, and they were it was this old Steppenwolf company,
right?
And so that was great. I had met them a few years before when Bob Bruler, who had been my dressing room mate at the Guthrie, went down and joined them to play Big Daddy in their production of.
And I imagine Gary and John doing of Mice and Men that they brought this maybe theater aesthetic to the film.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
They had done the play,
right? Yeah.
At least once before. Gary's dad was our editor.
Oh, cool.
And and Gary, this is like his third, I think, or fourth film, and he was comfortable with it. John, of course, had been doing a bunch of stuff.
Yep.
And it was interesting to watch the two of them interact because Gary was so prepared and so knew exactly what he wanted, and that it was hard sometimes for him to get out of the directing thing to play George. So John would screw up. John would do something, just and Gary would go, oh geez, but then there was the tension was gone,
right?
And suddenly they could do the scene.
Oh, cool, That's funny
because they knew each other and they knew what they needed and they knew what they wanted. And later on, when Gary was more comfortable with it, John would actually talk to him like a director. He would say, "Do we really need to get that coverage?" Or
Oh, funny. Yeah.
So,
because they had such a working relationship. But yeah,
they were amazing. Yeah, it was amazing to watch them. Yeah.
Well, all right. I'd be crazy if I didn't at least mention The Fugitive, given when it came out in my life and how many times, probably the dozens of times I've watched that film. So it's hard to pick just one project you've done, but I'd be remiss to at least not mention it. But also, it was also a big movie at the time, and
it was a huge movie.
Yeah, and so did that raise your profile in the industry? Was it helpful for getting work after that? Did it pigeonhole you at all? I'm just curious about that.
Well, there's two answers.
Right.
The first is it was an amazing movie to be part of. Andy Davis, the director, was incredible, but he was a Chicago theater guy.
Oh, cool.
And so so that was where the idea was from. And Harrison Ford was interested in doing the project, but only if they shot it in sequence, because he didn't want to be putting makeup on, putting wigs and beards and all that sort of stuff. And strangely enough, Andy realized it's perfectly set up for that. They never go back, to a previous place. The movie only moves forward.
Oh, cool! Yeah.
And so we started shooting it in Chicago. They shot the murder, they shot the trial, and then we put him on the bus, and then they flew us all down to Asheville, North Carolina, where there was a train, and the guy was willing to use his real train to do this, and it was amazing. Up to then, Tommy hadn't shown up, so it was Harrison. He's very quiet, but he was there all the time. And when you had to climb into this bus, which was crushed, in 30 and 40 degree weather, and get behind the camera, and he was there every shot. I mean, behind camera and doing all that. Couldn't have been more supportive of everyone.
Right.
And but if he had anything, he would go through Andy. He would say Andy, and then Andy would talk with him, and then he might make a change or he might not. It was fine, and he was doing it. And the other thing was he was totally gung ho. I mean, he wrecked his knee that still, I'm sure, it gives him trouble running after he got out of the train.
Right, yeah.
running through the stuff with the ankle
right, the chains on it.
Yeah, but he couldn't have amazing. Well, so then Tommy shows up, and you have to be part of his process, whether you want to be or not. And it's not a bad thing. I mean, it's really wonderful. But between shots, he say, "How much time we have?" And they say, "About 2 minutes." He say, "Okay, go up to my trailer." And it's not we did anything up there, but he just wanted everybody. He wanted be part of there. And then that whole speech about
the radius
check
and all
every
that.
outhouse, but
yeah.
he made that up because they told him to. I mean, they were trying to fill in stuff, in order to get all of the equipment and all the people there, and so they had me, say, can you say something like along these lines and da da da, and it was great. I mean, there was a real sense of everybody taking part in that, and so that was terrific. What they discovered then was that that was the story. The story was Tommy and Harrison's characters. It was not originally, as was written. It was like the pilot episode, three intermediate episodes, and then the final episode of The Fugitive. And so there was right after he escapes from the bus, he gets picked up by a waitress, and in the original script, and she gets him a job as a dishwasher at where she works, and the cook is abusing her, and so Harrison's character stands up for her and against the cook, and then the cook sees his face on the TV, and so he's got to run again, and then somebody else put about, well. They said, we don't need that. We're just going to get him to Chicago. So we'll have the waitress pick him up and let him off in Chicago.
Right.
and so then everything was, so they were madly writing in order to keep ahead of what they were shooting. So there was one day when they were prepping what they were going to do the next day, and one of the ADs says, "Oh, you can't do that. There's a St. Patrick's Day parade that day," and they said, "Where?" I said, blah, blah. He said, "Okay, let's write something." And I swear that was totally guerrilla shot.
Wow. Oh, it's such a great part of the film, too.
St. Patrick's Day thing. Yeah. They just went in and did it because, this is great. Let's use this. Well, and partly because, Andy was a Chicago guy.
Sure.
He knew it.
So, when that film comes out, and maybe somewhat like Glory, too, I mean, did that open a lot of doors for you afterward?
Glory opened actually opened more doors because I was an unknown commodity in LA at that time. Okay. And casting people want to make stars. They want to find the new person.
Got it.
And so they're excited when they see somebody that they don't know. By the time Fugitive came out, they had seen me in a number of things, which is great. I mean, it didn't negate it, but it got to be where where I said, well, can I get an audition for this? And they said, oh, yeah, we submitted you, but they say they know you and they like you, but you're not right for this. And I said, well, can I at least go? No, they don't have time. And so I said, okay, fine. But Fugitive and Free Willy, I think, came out 1 week apart in August. And every Wednesday night, this TV series that I shot right after The Fugitive called Ned Blessing was on CBS, this Western. So I said, this is great. I'm going to, by the end of August, I'm going to be fighting off offers.
Right.
Not only did I not work the rest of the year, I didn't have an audition for the rest of the year. And it's just, it was, I didn't expect it, but, I sort of said, okay, we got to start all over again.
And I think it's a great point to talk about because, as you look through your resume online, and I'm certainly there's just tons of credits every year, but the other side of that is, I imagine, well, not only, like you said, there were a lot of auditions you were not getting, but there were probably also a lot of projects you were not booking. Even though you have a lot of films and TVs and theater and projects in theater to your name, I'm sure there was a lot of things that you didn't get that maybe you wanted or you couldn't even be seen for, or all that kind of stuff. So I think it's important just for to at least acknowledge that you weren't just booking everything you were walking in for.
No, and sometimes you book something you couldn't do it. I was doing Desperate Measures, and so I was doing this and. I had one scene left in it, and they, for various reasons, it kept getting pushed, and I had auditioned way early on for Titanic, and to be part of the of Kathy Bates's table. I can't remember who exactly that was, but part of that group, and so it came down to there was a cutoff date. They were going to get the scene shot on this day, but they wanted me for Titanic before and after that date. And because it was shooting in Rosarito, Mexico, neither group was willing to make any concession on it. So I was committed to doing this last scene in Desperate Measures and never got a shot to do Titanic.
Well, how do you deal with, I mean, we talked a little bit about, again, I guess we could categorize it as rejection to some degree of, them not wanting to see you for auditions, but then also just, you don't get a chance to, shoot this part, or you don't get a chance to audition for something, or nothing's coming in. How and especially on top of a lot of success of being in these big projects, or like you said, that August, you were all over the place. How did you balance that experience with, nothing coming in and just the mental part of being an actor?
Well, that's all part of the business. I think, I've never felt anything personal in terms of rejection about auditions, but I know a lot of actors do, and sometimes it's a brief period of depression. Sometimes it's a long period. They're going, what am I going to do? And I'm for whatever reason, I'm pretty good at doing the audition and walking away. And, I bring the best I can to the audition, and if that's what they want, and all the other stars are in alignment, I'll get it. And if I don't, well, it didn't work out. On to the next thing. So it's never been something that I've dwelt on much.
Yeah. Well, and it's great to hear. And I think it certainly seems like it can be a healthy attitude to have. And I imagine one that was developed just from all the years of theater, just doing a lot of that stuff. And like you said, you looked at it as a job. It wasn't, this personal expression of your vulnerability that people are rejecting. It's work. It's just a job. And I might be right, or I might not be.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. I mean, I never even thought of in terms of a career.
Yeah.
I mean, this is what I do for a living.
Right. Again, there are so many projects and TV shows we could spend the whole weekend, in the week just talking about all of them. I will just highlight one more, and because it's something I've seen a lot, was the film Office Space. And I read that there were a number of auditions that you had to go through for that role. And
Yes.
the questions I had about this was, did you try anything different over those times? Or how do you stay out of your own way? I mean, we might have just addressed that in terms of like how you approach auditions, but it can be easy for some actors for, the voices in your head to start creeping in of like, well, maybe I should try this or maybe I should try that. And, you start second guessing yourself or whatever. So how did you, maintain, I guess we'll say, the integrity of your work through that process?
Well, Mike was very helpful with that.
Mike Judge, yeah.
He had written Mike Judge. He had written a wonderful script, and he was as interested in getting a group of people that that would spend some time together in Austin doing this, but that would work really well together and would jibe as much as getting exactly the character that he was looking for. So when I first came in, they had me read both for the psychiatrist and for Tom Smarkowski, and so I read them both, and I felt okay with both of them, and left. About a week or so later, I get a call. They said, "Can you come back and read for Tom? They've got somebody else in mind for the psychiatrist." I said, "Sure." So I went back in and I read, and essentially Mike said, "I like what you did. We just want to see it. If I have any ideas while we're at this audition, I'll mention it. But let's just see it again, and see how it goes." And it was mainly a matter of it wasn't doing it again, but it was re-experiencing that scene that he had written for this character. And then actually I came in one more time afterwards to read for Tom. I have no idea why. Mike didn't have anything to say about it, and he said, "Let's do it again." And I said, "Okay, let's do it again." But then he made a big point once he had cast the film of contacting people and saying, "Look, we're going to go down to Austin. It's my hometown. There's not going to be suits looking over our shoulders doing it. We're going to work hard. We've got 29 days to shoot this thing, but we're going to have a good time. I'll show you places where my band used to play. I'll show you, good places to eat, and we'll just have a great time." And that's what it was like. I mean, he couldn't have been a better host. And he did put together just an amazing cast of people. Again, not just incredible comics as they all are, but really wonderful people.
Oh, cool.
So that was the exciting part about that.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Well, and I know over the years, I mean, even with how busy you were doing film and TV, there were still theater projects that came along. And I mean, a lot of people can justify not doing theater because they're so busy with film and TV or maybe the money or the creativity or whatever it is. But you made choices to, you did The Iceman Cometh, and then The Man Who Had All the Luck. So what were your decisions or what were you looking for at those points? And even I know more recently you did Straight White Men, play, which I saw at Steppenwolf in Chicago. And have, there's a lot of things we could ask about that play, but, what was your decision or desire to do those plays, and how did that come about?
Well, I mean, I started out in theater, and I love theater, and I've always said when people ask, what are the differences, that theater is the actor's medium.
Sure.
Once you go through the rehearsal process and the show is open, it's up to you and the audience and that communication, and so you are in charge of what of what's going to happen on this particular night or afternoon. Whereas film is very much the director's and editor's medium. You're trying to provide the best possible raw footage for them to tell the story, and they're going to take what works best for them in the storytelling process. Now, it doesn't change what you do as an actor, but you have less control over the final product. And in TV, it's definitely the writer's medium. I remember the first show I did was My Two Dads, the first TV show,
sure,
the 3-camera thing, and I played Dakin's son, and Eric Christmas was his father. The three of us were in a scene with Paul Reiser, and it was wonderful doing it. But we would do the scene. There'd be this silence, and then somebody come out and give us new lines if we didn't get a laugh at a certain point. And Dakin said, "That's it." I mean, they don't trust the actors. They don't trust the directors. They're going to rewrite it until they get their laugh.
Mm. Dakin was actually a guest on the show. Dakin Matthews. That's who you're talking about. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And we had a good time, and they were very, they're very nice, and the new lines were good, and we eventually got all the laughs they wanted. But it's again, you're doing, you're given the material, and you're trying to provide them with what they need in order to tell their story.
Right.
And so I always liked the idea of going back to the theater where you have more control, where there's more that you're a part of. Mm. Now, each of those was an interesting experience. When I first came out here to LA, my agent said, "Okay, you're out here now. We're going to send you out for auditions, but you have to promise not to do theater for 3 years." I said, "What?" They said, "You're never available. I mean, as soon as we send you out for auditions, and by the time they decide they want you, you're committed to doing some piece of theater." And I said, "Okay, I'll try." And then immediately they sent me out for a 99-seat house show, because the assistant artistic director at the Taper had asked me if they knew anybody that could fill in for this actor that fell out at the last minute. And that turned out to be a great experience. There were so many people in that I worked with, that eventually I worked with in other medium. Mm-hmm. And then similarly, about 3 years later, when I was actually past that period, they sent me out for a play, Distant Fires, that was being done at the Coast Playhouse, and was being co-produced by D.B. Sweeney, Sam Jackson, and Michael T. Williamson, and they were all in it, and they had it had been done with some success in New York, and I knew the playwright. I had done Right Behind the Flag for him at the Playwrights Horizons with Kevin Spacey, interesting enough. And so when they were looking for somebody to play this role, they asked him for any suggestions, and he suggested they try and get in touch with me. So it was a wonderful experience. We had a great 6 run at the Coast Playhouse, and it was thoroughly enjoyable, and and a great thing to work with him. With that group. The big thing they said, even before they did the audition, was they said, "Look, 99-seat house, people come and go. They have this whole thing about if you get 24 hours notice for, you can leave. We aren't going to do that. We're going to do this play like it's an off-Broadway show in New York. You're committed to it from beginning of rehearsal to the end of the run, and that's that. Are you willing to do that?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." And so in fact that's the way it was, and that was great.
Cool.
Yeah, and so then Iceman Cometh came up, mm-hmm. and Kevin was co-producing it. It was a production that had been a huge hit in London, and he was in New York, and he was doing the auditions in New York, but he was also shooting American Beauty at the time.
Oh, right, yeah. Sure.
And so he couldn't come out to L.A. So they submitted people. The agents submitted people for the various roles, and he checked off. He pre-approved the ones that he would be interested in working with. Usually again, and so I got on that pre-approved list, and I got cast. And it was wonderful to go out there and do that. Yeah. And Again, it was an amazing cast of people and a wonderful director. And it was a limited run. They were going to do it for 14 weeks, and then they were going to spend 3 weeks and shoot it for Showtime. Well, Showtime decided they didn't have 3.5 hours to spend on an O'Neill play.
Yep.
So Kevin said, "Are you willing to just do the play in the theater for another 3 weeks?" And everybody said, "Sure." And so we did.
Cool.
But it was really could not have been a better experience. I was doing Grounded for Life, and it was hiatus, and I'd always wanted to work at the at Williamstown.
Sure.
And it turned out that there was a break during the hiatus to do this Miller play. Miller was going to be there, which was exciting as well. Yeah. And and so I auditioned for it. They cast me. I went out to Williamstown. We had a great time doing it. And then I came back to do Grounded for Life, and they decided that they didn't need my character really as a regular anymore. They were, I could come in occasionally as a recurring, but they were going to stress the kids more.
Right. Okay.
And so I get a call from the Williamstown people. They're saying we're going to take it for a limited run at the American Airlines Theater. Would you be willing to come and do that? And I said, yeah.
Wow.
So I got to go out and do it again there. Miller was there, still there. He was, he came to the opening. He came to the rehearsals. He came to the opening. Came to the close. It was wonderful to be able to spend some time with him and hear about him. And it was, it's just his story about that was that he had written it as a student at the University of Michigan, and it had won this prize. And it got sent to producers in New York, and they wanted to produce it. And he was 24 years old.
Wow.
And he said, "Oh yeah, of course, do that."
Sure.
So they were suddenly it's called Man Who Had All the Luck, a fable. And he was watching them do it, and they were trying to do it like kitchen sink drama. And he was going, I can't say anything. I'm 24 years old. These guys are all, long-time producers and that. And it ran 4 performances and never was seen again until it was revived, for this production. Straight White Men.
Yes.
I occasionally, when I get a chance, do readings or workshops with some of the theaters. I'd done a couple with the Taper, and that was one that I had done. And so I did the workshop, and then they opened it in Ohio and did it at the Public, and then I get a call from young Gene Lee and saying the actor that was playing the father is not going to be able to do a couple more tour spots we have. Would you be willing to do that? And I said sure, and so I went out there and I rehearsed it with the guys that were going to do the shows. We opened in Toronto, then we played in Athens and Brussels, and then they said, we're going to do a sit-down at the Kirk Douglas for 4 weeks. Can you do that? I said, sure. Wow. And the exciting thing about it was I had different sons for every single show.
Oh, wow.
Because they couldn't get the same people to, and it really kept it alive, made it just wonderful.
Well, and I mean, it's a play for those who have seen it. It raises a lot of interesting questions, and it's written by an Asian female, about these straight white men, as it's called. What did you feel like you? Because I was at performances where there'd be talkbacks or questions and people's take on the characters and, well, what is this guy trying to do and what does it say about men today and all this kind of stuff. Did you feel like you took anything specific away from working on the play? Like, did it open up any ideas for you or perspectives or because it's just such a thought-provoking show.
Well, it is. I mean, here's a guy who's recently widowed, whose 3 adult sons decide they're going to spend Christmas with him, and they revert to what they were like as kids, and eventually he has to throw them all out.
Right.
And and one of them has moved in with him, is living with him, and is the one that should have been, the star of the family, and he's sort of fallen apart, and you can't quite tell why, and the father's trying to help him out, and it's not working. And he says, "Look, take the money go make something of your life. One of the guys is very successful, and it turns out that he's not as successful as anybody thinks he is.
Mm-hmm.
And the other young kid just hates everything. Is the middle kid, and that's his whole thing, is just
right.
Fighting everybody on either side of him. So I mean, the family dynamic, I think she really captured that. She said she wrote it because she's not a male, she's not white.
Right.
She wanted to do something that was totally outside of her comfort zone, and so I praise her for that.
Yeah. Well, and speaking of theater, you are doing Key Largo at the Geffen.
Yes, and that was another thing. They wanted to do a workshop, 1 week workshop.
Okay.
And it's an adaptation of mainly the movie, but the elements of the play.
Okay. Yeah.
And by Jeffrey Hatcher and Andy Garcia.
Oh, okay.
And they wanted to see if they had a script. If they had something to do it, and Andy wanted it to be a comfortable thing that was totally focused on the text, on the word.
Right.
And so he asked for people that he had worked with, and I just happened to be fortunately fit in that category.
Oh, okay. And so are you're playing the father at the hotel?
No.
Oh, okay.
I'm playing Sheriff Gash.
Oh, okay.
Who in the movie you barely see, but in the play, that's part of the play they've taken. He has this kind of amazing political discussion just before he leaves and just before the final fight, and saying, this is what life is like. You've got to offer protection to those that can pay for it and do your best to protect them. But you can't be expected to worry about every little thing. And so I'm leaving, and you guys take care of your problem.
Well, very cool. I mean, it sounds like Andy and the production luck out, not only because you had worked with him and so he knew you, but, you have such a long theater background that, this is your medium. You're very comfortable on stage. And so, you're adept with language and you know how to handle it and you know how to do the run. So I imagine it'll be exciting to be back up on stage again.
Yeah, I think it will be.
Very cool.
I think it will be.
And, and we've been talking, theater has been kind of a through line throughout. And I knew you were open, if you had a little bit of time, just to talk about this speech from The Winter's Tale, which is great because it's one of the later Shakespeare plays. And so, a lot of scholars talk about how advanced the language was in terms of Shakespeare's writing style, that it wasn't, this simple Two Gentlemen of Verona, that he was really experimenting with the form and really doing different things. And so I think it's great to look at something that is, thought of as maybe more advanced. And so, this is in Act 1, Scene 2, where Leontes is starting to have his suspicions and he's talking to Camillo. And wherever you want to jump in with it. And it's a little bit of a speech that starts with, "Is whispering nothing," for anyone who wants to find it and follow along.
Right. And it's interesting. I mean, I think it's his second last play or his third last play. And it is very sophisticated in terms of the language. And it starts right in the middle of it. You have no idea. There's no backstory to why Leontes has these questions about his lovely pregnant wife, and this is happening in the middle of a party, a bon voyage party,
right?
And finally, and he's been saying these terrible things, and Camilla's been trying to say, "Oh, come on, this is you can't say that. I would not be standard by to hear my sovereign mistress clouded." So and finally he says, "Look, if you love me, you're his cupbearer. Poison him. Get rid of him if you love me." And Camilla can't understand why he asked this, and so this is his final reasoning behind it, and it's interesting in that it's these short half sentences,
right?
With lots of punctuation, and it's kind of an amazing piece of writing.
Mm.
So he says to Camilla, "Is whispering nothing? Is leaning cheek to cheek? Is meeting noses, kissing with inside lips, stopping the career of laughter with a sigh? A note infallible of breaking honesty. Horsing foot on foot, skulking in corners, wishing clocks more swift, hours, minutes, noon, midnight, and all eyes blind with the pin and web, but theirs only that would unseen be wicked. Is this nothing? Why then the world and all that's in's nothing. The covering sky is nothing. Bohemia nothing. My wife is nothing. Nor nothing have these nothings if this be nothing."
Very cool. Yeah, I love that there's all those, the lines are all broken up with all these questions, and as you said, these half sentences, and of course, the repetition of the word nothing, throughout.
Yes. And the it's often said that sense is done through consonants and emotion through vowels.
Mm-hmm.
And the choice of consonants is very interesting in this too. I mean, it's whispering, leaning, meeting noses, kissing. It's all the syllables, a lot of sibilant sounds.
Now you said, when you first auditioned for Ashland, that, you were doing 3 Shakespeare plays and you'd only done a couple. Where did you feel that you really, hit your stride with Shakespeare, or you started to feel like you knew what you were doing with Shakespeare? Was it from doing the stuff at Ashland in that first season?
Well, the first season was certainly made me more comfortable with it. I think I've done now 19 or 20 of the plays.
Oh, wow.
Probably 35 maybe productions, and it's so, the plays are so well written.
Yeah.
And if you like I say, if you explore the sounds even, they really help you determine what you're trying to do in each scene and in each speech, and it's a way that it's there's musicality to it, there's rhythm to it, it's everything. It's like Wagner used to say, Gesamtwerk, Gesamtkunstwerk. Yeah, it's everything.
Yeah,
right there.
Well, and I imagine part of the creativity, or maybe even fun for the actor, is figuring out, where does this come from? Because, like you said, it's not, we don't know where this feeling has started. Like you said, we start in the middle of the conversation, and so creating that place for yourself as the actor, as the character of where is Leontes coming from?
Right, and he's making himself crazy.
Right,
probably
of course.
Drinking. He's probably drinking. His wife is pregnant, so maybe she's not as fun in bed as she had been before. He's beginning to doubt whether Mamilius is actually his son.
Right. Yeah.
Everything, everywhere he looks, he's creating this. He's 28 years old. Maybe it's schizophrenia. Maybe it continues until Hermione is killed in childbirth, or you think,
right, of course, yeah.
And suddenly he goes, "Oh my God, what have I been saying? What have I been doing?" And he spends 16 years, atoning for it. None of which you see.
Right.
Because time goes to Bohemia.
Yes.
And then Bohemia comes back and says, "I think I've got this magical thing that you need to be aware of." And he's lost. He's lost in this love that somehow has traveled over time, over space,
yep.
from death to life, and it's yeah.
Well, and just one thing I am curious about with this particular speech, because the word nothing is repeated, I think a lot of actors, might overlook that, or, just not know, well, what do I do with, I say the word nothing, what is it, 8 times in the speech or something like that. And yeah. I mean, and maybe it's something that is perhaps more instinctual for you at this point, but if you're looking at another speech in Shakespeare and you see that repetition, where does your mind start going in terms of maybe the questions you need to start asking or what you want to be curious about?
Well, why? Why did Shakespeare, choose to repeat this particular word?
Right.
Is it for emphasis? Is it because he can't find another word to describe what he's trying to say? Is it because all he sees is nothingness at this point?
Right.
There's so many different possibilities, and they're all there, and you can use them all, and you can use different ones for different nights.
Right. Yeah. Talk about keeping it interesting and keeping it fresh. Right.
Yeah.
Richard, I just had a last couple quick questions. It's been so great to talk about your life and your career, and we could probably go for double this and just, keep having a good time. But, as we talked about at the top, you're a busy guy. There's a lot of work, you still have ahead of you, including the play coming up at the Geffen. But I was curious, whenever I see you in a TV or film project, you seem so perfectly cast, in so many things. And yet, I'm curious, I would imagine even you would say you're not the only good character actor out there.
Oh my God, no.
Right. And so is there something that you feel like you've been able to bring, like why you are the right guy for the job so many times? I mean, working this much is can't be a fluke, that if you're so regularly cast in so many different projects, and I'm sure, you worked with the same casting offices numerous times and maybe even production companies and all that. Are you able to look back and see a through line of this is why I was able to work so much?
I don't know for sure. And the last part is I find less true. I don't work with the same casting people again.
Okay.
Again and again. For a while, the people that cast The Fugitive, they would call me in for everything, and I ended up doing 3 or 4 films for them, and then never heard from them again. And similarly, there's a number of. I mean, I did like 3 movies with Michael Ironsides, and then never again. So it's always I always find that it very strange. There's a thing that I noticed where even if I'm working, if I'm out of town for 5 weeks or 2 months or something, it's like I've never been here. And nobody knows who I am.
Wow.
And and that's, in a way, that's fine if they'll see me.
Right.
But for whatever reason, often the auditions don't come. And I don't know why. I mean, there's other actors I've worked with a lot who I see cropping up a lot more, and they'll say the same thing. They'll say, "Oh yeah, we love to, I would love to have more opportunity to do things. It just seems that you only get a certain number of slots."
Right.
As Big Daddy says, you only have a certain number of times.
Well, yeah, and it certainly sounds like there's definitely a making peace with the business and accepting, just the realities of it. It is what it is, and you make peace with that process, and then you go back and do your work and try to get the next job.
Yeah, that's sort of it. The fact is, I never wanted to come to Los Angeles, and I've never liked Los Angeles, and but I have resigned myself to the fact that this is where the work is.
Right.
And I did a couple weeks anyway at this new play festival in Southern Indiana, and one of the writers in residence there said, so when are you going to do some more theater? And I said, well, I don't know. I want to go back to New York eventually, but there's still so much that opportunity here in Los Angeles. But I see a point, and it's probably closer than further away.
Right.
When the film and TV stuff is going to dry up to so much that I can finally retire to do theater.
You can join all of your siblings in retirement. Exactly,
but that's it. I think when I can again make that time commitment,
of course,
to do theater.
Cool. Well, Richard, this has been a great chat. Thank you so much for your time today. This has been outstanding.
Oh, thank you, Nathan. I've really enjoyed it.
Hey guys, Nathan here one more time. If you enjoyed this episode, please remember to subscribe so you don't miss anything ahead. Be sure to visit workingactorsjourney.com for additional info and links for items mentioned in today's episode, as well as all the episodes. You can follow the show on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. All the links are on our site and in the episode notes. Become a premium member and enjoy additional benefits and perks of the show starting at just $2 per month. Head over to workingactorsjourney.com/premium to join the Working Actors community. And don't forget to claim your free audiobook at workingactorsjourney.com/audible. Thanks again to today's guest and to everyone that makes these episodes possible. And a special thanks to you for listening. I'm Nathan Agan, and enjoy the journey.